The stew was thick and hot, filled with salty meat and hard winter vegetables. Steam rose up into the cold air like a quiet prayer over Providence Gulch. Abel sat alone outside the tavern, eating slowly at a rough wooden table. It was the only place where a man like him could sit without being bothered. He was big, quiet, and kept to himself. Most people preferred it that way. The cold was sharp, biting through his jacket and settling deep into his bones, but he was used to it. It felt like an old companion that never left him. Frost clung to his long beard as he lifted each spoonful to his mouth. He was a huge man, strong like the mountains around the town. Every move he made was slow and careful, like he didn't want to waste even the smallest bit of energy. He didn't talk much. He didn't show much feeling either. Inside the tavern, people laughed and talked loudly, but to Abel it sounded far away, like noise from another world. He didn't care for it. He liked the quiet more, the sound of the wind in the trees and the steady weight of the spoon in his hand. Then something moved, just a small movement, barely noticeable, but not the wind. Abel's eyes shifted. Two figures stepped out from the dim light of evening. They looked almost the same, like twins, thin, fragile, wrapped in worn gray clothes that did little to protect them from the cold. Their dresses had once been fine silk, but now they were faded and torn. The color had turned dull, like ash. They looked out of place in this rough, frozen town. They stopped a few steps away from his table. Their hands were folded in front of them, their heads slightly bowed. They looked different, like delicate figures left outside in a storm. One of them spoke softly. Her voice was gentle, almost like the sound of a dry leaf brushing the ground. "Sir, may we have your leftovers?" Abel stopped. His spoon froze halfway to his mouth. He had seen beggars before, many of them men with empty eyes. People broken by hunger and bad luck. He never paid them any attention. This land was hard. Everyone took care of themselves. He didn't believe in pity. He was just about to grunt and send them away, like he always did. But then he looked up, and he saw their eyes. They were the same, dark, tired, and deeply worn. But inside that tiredness there was something strong, something that refused to break. They were not begging the way others did. There was no fake sadness, no act, just silence. A deep, heavy silence. It was the silence of people who had lost everything but still held onto their pride. They weren't asking for kindness. They were simply standing there telling the truth without words. They were hungry. They were cold, and they were barely holding on. Something in Abel shifted. In their eyes, he saw something familiar, something buried deep inside himself. Pain, quiet pain. His hand slowly lowered. The spoon touched the bowl with a soft sound. He looked at both of them again. Their lips were pale from the cold, their bodies stiff, trying not to shake. Without a word, he pushed the heavy bowl across the table toward them. "Take it," he said. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. Then he pushed his cornbread forward, too. "All of it." The two women looked at the food, then at each other. They shared a silent glance. The one who spoke gave a small bow. The other did the same, but they didn't rush. They didn't grab the food like starving animals. Instead, one of them pulled out a pair of worn chopsticks from her sleeve, then another pair. They began to eat slowly, carefully, respectfully. They shared each bite, taking turns, making sure the other had enough. It wasn't just eating. It felt like something more, like a quiet ceremony of survival. Snow began to fall around them. The yellow light from the tavern window cast long shadows across the ground. Inside, people were watching. Abel could feel their eyes. He even heard someone laugh. The tavern door opened. Sheriff Brody stepped outside, wiping his mouth with his hand. His eyes were sharp as he looked at the scene. "Abel," he called out. His voice carried authority. "You know we don't have room for their kind here." Abel didn't turn. He kept watching the two women. "They were supposed to leave when the railroad work ended," the sheriff continued. Still, Abel said nothing. He watched as they carefully finished every last bit of food. Not a drop was left behind. When they were done, they stood up. The first one looked at him. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. The other nodded in agreement. They turned, ready to disappear back into the darkness. Abel imagined it. A cold alley, a broken shelter, the freezing wind finding them before morning. Something inside him tightened. It didn't feel like pity, it felt heavier, stronger. Before he could stop himself, he stood up. "Wait!" The word was firm. They stopped. Slowly, they turned back. Abel glanced past them, the sheriff, the people watching. A strange anger rose inside him, not loud, but solid. "My cabin," he said. His voice was rough. "It's warm." He paused. "You can stay the night." The walk to Abel's cabin was quiet. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady crunch of his heavy boots in the snow and the softer, careful steps behind him. He held a lantern in his hand. Its small light shook as he walked, making a circle of warm gold in the dark woods. Outside that light, everything was black and cold. The wind moved through the trees like something alive. Abel walked in front, breaking the path through the deep snow. His wide shoulders blocked most of the wind, giving the two women some shelter. He didn't look back, but he could hear them. Their breathing was light and fast, tired, very tired. After some time, they reached his cabin. It stood deep in the woods, far away from the town. Small, simple, and strong, built by Abel himself from heavy logs. Smoke rose slowly from the chimney. That meant the fire inside was still alive. Abel stepped forward and pushed the door open. Warm light spilled out. Inside, the cabin was quiet and clean. A fire burned low in the stone fireplace, giving off a soft orange glow. The air smelled like pine wood, smoke, and a little bit of coffee. There was only one room, a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs. Everything was neat and in its place. The two women stopped at the doorway. They didn't step in right away. They looked at the warm room. Then back at the dark, freezing night behind them. Their faces showed something mixed together, hope and fear. Abel understood. A man like him, a place like this. Nothing came free in a world like theirs. He stepped aside, leaving the doorway open. "The floor near the fire is warm," he said. "I've got blankets." He nodded toward a wooden chest near his bed. That was all. No promises, no pressure, just space. He walked to the fire and stirred the coals with a metal rod. The flames grew stronger as he added another log. Sparks flew upward. He kept his back to them, giving them privacy. After a moment, he heard soft footsteps. They had come inside. A cold gust followed them in before the door shut with a solid thud. The outside world was gone. Abel took 2 thick blankets from the chest and laid them on the floor near the fire, leaving some distance between them and his bed. Then he filled a metal cup with water and placed it on the table. He didn't say anything else. He sat on his bed and slowly pulled off his boots. It was something he did every night, a simple habit, something normal, but tonight it felt different. He could feel their eyes on him, watching, careful. When he finished, he lay down fully dressed and turned his face toward the wall. He didn't look at them, but he heard everything. The soft sound of their clothes, the quiet whispers in a language he didn't understand. Then the sound of them settling onto the blankets. After that, silence. Only the fire crackling and the wind outside. Abel stayed awake for a long time, listening. Their breathing was soft, steady. It was a new sound in his life, a strange sound, but not a bad one. It made the silence feel different. Morning came early. Abel woke before the sun like always. The fire had burned low and the room was cold again. He moved quietly, careful not to make noise. The two women were still asleep near the fire, curled together under the blankets. In the soft gray light, they looked younger, not as tired, almost like girls instead of women. Abel added wood to the fire and set a pot of coffee to boil. Then he cut thick pieces of bacon and placed them in a heavy pan. Soon the smell filled the cabin, hot, rich, strong. He was turning the bacon when he heard a small sound. He looked over. One of the women was awake. She sat up slowly, watching him. Her eyes were clear now, sharp. The other one woke soon after, pulled from sleep by the smell of food. "We must earn this," the first one said. Her voice was calm, not asking, stating. Abel didn't look at her. "I said one night," he replied. "We will work," she said again more firmly. "We do not take charity." She nudged her sister. Both of them stood up. They folded the blankets neatly, very neatly, like it mattered, like it was important. Abel noticed something then. Their dresses weren't just old. They had been repaired many times. Carefully, every stitch was small and perfect, a sign of patience, of survival. The quieter sister picked up a cloth and began cleaning the table. No one asked her to, she just did it. The other one picked up Abel's jacket from a chair. She looked closely at a tear in the sleeve. "I can fix this," she said. She looked at him, waiting. Abel didn't know what to say. His life had always been simple. He did everything himself. No help. No one touching his things. But something about the way she stood, proud and calm, he couldn't refuse. "There's a sewing kit," he said quietly, "on the shelf." He pointed without looking at her. He served the food, bacon, eggs. They sat at the table, and once again they ate slowly, respectfully. When they finished, they cleaned everything, the plates, the pan, the table, like it was their own home. The quiet sister swept the floor. The other sat by the fire and began sewing his jacket. Her hands moved quickly, skillfully, better than his. Abel sat nearby, pretending to sharpen a knife. But really, he was watching. Her hands were red from the cold, but steady, focused. There was a story there, a hard one. He wondered just for a moment how they ended up here. Alone, hungry, forgot. He had heard stories about the railroad, about workers being used and then left behind. Maybe that was their story too. He didn't ask. He just watched and listened to the soft sound of the needle moving through the cloth. Later that day, Abel went outside to check his traps. He stood at the door for a moment before leaving. Something felt different. He wasn't used to leaving people inside his cabin. It made him pause. "I'll be back before dark," he said. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth. The first woman, Lynn, just nodded. She didn't stop her sewing. Abel stepped outside and closed the door behind him. The cold hit him right away, sharp and strong, but his mind wasn't on the weather. It was still back inside the cabin. When he returned that evening, the first thing he noticed was the smell. Not just smoke. Something else, clean, fresh. He opened the door and stepped inside. Then he stopped. The cabin looked different. The floor was scrubbed. His extra clothes were washed and hanging near the fire. Even the small window had been cleaned, letting in more light. A pot of thin soup was cooking slowly over the fire. The quiet sister, Sue, was softly humming as she arranged his tools on a shelf. Everything was neat, organized, calm. Lynn sat by the fire still sewing. Now she was fixing one of his shirts. They hadn't asked for permission. They hadn't waited. They had simply taken care of the place. Abel stood in the doorway for a long moment. Cold air still moved around him, but inside something felt warm, not just from the fire, something else, something new. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel empty. Days passed, then more days. The one night he had offered turned into many. No one said anything about it. It just happened. Abel would go out each day, hunting, cutting wood, checking traps. The sisters stayed and worked. They cleaned, cooked, repaired everything. They never rested for long. They worked with quiet pride. They didn't want charity, so they earned their place. Abel saw that, and without saying anything, he started doing more too. When he went to town, he bought extra flour, extra salt. He left the bags on the table. No words. One morning, he brought back 2 pairs of strong leather boots. He placed them near the fire before they woke. Later, he saw them wearing them. Their thin slippers were gone. That was enough. But the town had noticed. People talked. Whispers followed him wherever he went. At the store, one man muttered under his breath, "Keeping them foreign women up there ain't right." The store owner, Henderson, looked at Abel differently now. "Be careful," he warned quietly. "People are getting upset." "Sheriff's hearing about it." Abel said nothing. He just stared until the man looked away. Then he paid and left. The town felt colder now, not from snow, from people, but Abel didn't back down. The cabin was his land, his rules, and inside those walls there was warmth, peace, something worth protecting. Slowly, things began to change. Abel started talking more, not much, just small things. He pointed at a bird one day. "Whiskey Jack," he said. Lynn watched it fly. Then she said its name in her own language. It sounded soft, almost like music. He learned things about them. Lynn was older only by a few minutes. She spoke more. She was strong and practical. Sue was quieter, gentler. She liked small, beautiful things. One day, Abel came home and saw something new, a small knot made from string, carefully woven, hanging on the wall. It had no use. It was just beautiful. The first decoration his cabin had ever seen. Then winter turned worse. A storm came. Strong winds shook the cabin. Snow piled high outside. Inside, they stayed close to the fire. That night, Sue started coughing. At first, it was soft, then deeper, harder. By morning, she was burning with fever. Her body shook. Her breathing was weak. She couldn't stand. Lynn stayed by her side, wiping her face, helping her drink water, trying to stay calm, but the fever kept rising. Abel watched from across the room. His stomach felt tight. He knew how to survive in the wild. Fix wounds, set bones, but this was different. This was something he couldn't fight. "She needs a doctor," Lynn said. Her voice shook. For the first time, she looked afraid. She looked at him. The town, Abel knew what that meant. Bringing a doctor would bring attention, the sheriff, the law, trouble, but he looked at Sue, pale, weak, fading. There was no choice. "I'll go," he said. He wrapped himself in heavy furs and stepped into the storm. The wind hit him hard. Snow blinded him. He could barely see ahead. Every step was a fight, but he kept going, step by step, through the cold, through the dark, until finally he reached town. He pushed open the doctor's door, covered in snow. The doctor looked up in shock. "Abel, what happened?" "One of the women," Abel said. "Fever, bad." The doctor sighed. "The Chinese girls, this will cause trouble." Abel stepped closer, his voice low. "Are you a doctor or just someone who talks?" "She's dying." The room went quiet. The doctor looked at him, then nodded. He packed his bag. "I'll come," he said, "but this won't stay quiet." The journey back was even harder, but they made it. When they entered the cabin, Lynn rushed forward. Relief filled her face. The doctor checked Sue quickly. "Lung fever," he said. "Serious." He gave medicine, left instructions. "Keep her warm, keep her drinking." Then he turned to Abel. "The sheriff will hear about this. Be ready." For the next 2 days, no one slept much. Abel and Lynn stayed beside Sue, taking turns, giving water, keeping the fire strong, waiting, hoping. The storm outside never stopped, but inside something changed. They moved together without speaking much, like they understood each other. Abel brought coffee. Lynn stopped him from overfeeding the fire. Small things, quiet teamwork. One night Lynn sat beside him, her voice soft. "My name means forest," she said. "Sue means simple." She looked around the cabin. "It fits." Then she told him their story. Their parents had died at a railroad camp. They worked to finish the job, then were told to leave. No pay, no help, nothing. She said it calmly, like it was just truth. Abel listened. He understood now, the strength in her eyes, the silence. It all made sense. He looked at Sue, then at Lynn, and said quietly, "This is your home, as long as you want it." Lynn looked at him, really looked, then gave a small nod. By morning, the storm had passed. Everything outside was covered in clean, white snow. The sky was bright blue. The air was so cold it almost hurt to breathe. Inside the cabin, it was quiet, peaceful. Sue's fever had finally broken during the night. She was sleeping calmly now, her breathing slow and steady. The danger had passed. Abel stood outside, splitting wood. Each swing of the axe was strong and steady. Crack. The sound echoed through the frozen air. Then he saw them, 2 men riding up the path, Sheriff Brody and his deputy. Abel didn't stop working. Crack. Another log split in half. He already knew why they were coming. The doctor had warned him. The men got off their horses and walked closer. Snow crunched under their boots. "Abel," the sheriff said, "we need to talk." Abel placed the axe into the wood and turned to face them. "I'm listening." He didn't invite them inside. He stood in front of his door like a guard. "Dr. Miller reported this," the sheriff said. "He treated a Chinese woman here." He paused. "By law, they're not allowed to stay. I'm supposed to take them out of the county." Abel's voice stayed calm. "She was sick, dying. Now she's not, she stays." "It's not your call," the sheriff replied. "There are rules. The town is upset." "A threat," Abel said quietly. "2 women with nothing, who are they a threat to?" Before the sheriff could answer, the cabin door opened. Lynn stepped outside. She closed the door gently behind her. She was wearing one of Abel's shirts, too big for her but tied at the waist. She looked small, but she stood tall. Strong, she faced the sheriff without fear. "We are not vagrants," she said clearly. "We worked for the railroad. We finished our contract. They owe us money. We are not beggars. We are owed." The sheriff looked surprised, not just by her words, but by how she said them, calm, strong, respectful. "They can go to court for that," he said. Lynn shook her head slightly. "No court will listen to us. We came here for shelter. We asked to work. We were treated badly." She paused. Mr. Abel gave us a place when we would have died outside. We have done no harm. Abel watched her, proud. She wasn't begging. She was standing her ground like a tree in a storm. The law is the law, the sheriff said, but his voice was weaker now. Abel stepped forward, standing slightly in front of Lynn, a quiet ive move. These women are under my protection, he said. This is my land. If you want to take them, you go through me. The deputy shifted nervously. His hand moved near his gun, but the sheriff raised a hand to stop him. He looked around, the clean path, the stacked wood, the smoke from the chimney. This wasn't trouble, this was a home. He took a deep breath. There is another way, he said slowly. If they work for you as hired help, they can stay legally. He looked at Abel. Are they your employees? It was an easy answer, a simple way out. Abel looked at Lynn. Their eyes met. In that moment, they understood each other. She would never accept being called a servant. Never. Abel turned back to the sheriff. No, they are not my workers, he paused, then said the words that changed everything. They are my family. Silence filled the air. Even the wind seemed to stop. Family, a word Abel hadn't used in years, a word he thought was gone forever. But now it was real again. The sheriff looked at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. All right, he said. You tell anyone who asks that I came here. And found no problem. He turned to his deputy. Let's go. They got on their horses and rode away. No more questions, no more trouble. Abel stood there for a while, watching them disappear into the trees. Then he felt it, someone beside him. He turned. Lynn was standing there. Her eyes were soft, warm. Thank you, she said quietly. Go inside, Abel replied. It's cold. She nodded and went back in. Abel stayed outside for a few more moments. The air felt different now. Lighter. Like something heavy was gone. He picked up his axe again. He had work to do. He had a family to take care of. Days passed. The town didn't fully accept them, but it didn't matter anymore. The cabin became their world, safe, warm, together. Sue got stronger every day. Soon her soft humming filled the room again. Life felt calm, peaceful. Something new began to grow between Abel and Lynn. Not loud, not fast, just small moments. He would bring her a flower he found. She would save him the best food. They shared quiet looks, understanding each other without words. One evening, Lynn helped him fix a leather strap. Their hands touched just for a second, but it felt like something big. She looked at him. He looked at her. No words, but everything was understood. From that day on, something warm stayed between them, always. Winter slowly began to end. Snow started to melt. Water dripped from the roof. The world outside began to change. One day, Sue stood by the window. Spring is coming, she said happily. Abel walked over. Lynn stood beside him. He looked outside, at the melting snow, at the new life coming. Then he felt it, a small hand slipping into his. Lynn's hand, warm, strong, fitting perfectly in his. He gently held it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She understood. He looked out at the world again. The cold winter was ending. But inside that small cabin, with the two women who had become his family, his life was just beginning.